Did you ever wonder where Popeye got his name from? Maybe it's because if you make him mad, he'll pop you in the eye. And what is his last name anyway? Fried chicken? Popeye's superpower is eating an entire can of spinach at once, and then he becomes stronger, so he can absolutely destroy his rival Bluto. And the next morning, I assume, his own toilet. I think if I had to choose between getting beat up or chugging an entire can of spinach at once, I would just take the beating. These are the jokes, folks. I'll be here all week. Remember to tip your waiter. Popeye was an arcade game developed by Nintendo and released in 1982. Originally, Nintendo had wanted to license the rights to the character for what would become Donkey Kong, but were unable to get them. After the massive success of that game, they could get the rights, and Popeye was made as a separate game. Like most early arcade games, the action is confined to one screen and a few different levels that cycle through to harder and harder difficulty. Nintendo would go on to port Popeye as one of the original Famicom and NES games, and I never really played the NES port much, so I decided to finally give it a go. To be completely honest, by the time I had a NES, most games had already evolved pretty well past high score chasing waved-based games like that, and by proximity, so had my taste. Sure, 5-year-old me loved simple Atari games that were easy to grasp and play, but 8-year-old me craved the kind of games like Zelda that required weeks to play, hand-drawn maps, or a good old issue of Nintendo Power to eventually clear. But I have to say, Popeye is a pretty good port, and fun for a little while at least, with your replayability depending on how much you enjoy the core gameplay. Each stage begins with Olive Oil, a human walking stick, and the two men that vie for her affections, Popeye and Bluto. Popeye is a freakish mutant-looking sailor, and Bluto is more the caveman type, just as soon likely to drag the woman of his choice away by her hair. So, Popeye's the better choice here because, well, he's not Bluto. On the first level, Olive prances gleefully around the top of the stage, randomly tossing her hearts out while the two simps battle to the death, and for some reason, jealousy I assume, an angry hag tosses bouncing skulls at you. When I say both men battle it out, what I mean really is that Popeye runs around trying to avoid Bluto, who fluctuates between slowly wandering around or aggressively attacking you, depending on the wave. The AI is impressive for a game that old, but it also seems pretty inconsistent. Bluto can reach up a level and attack you, and also jump down with a pound move, as well as throw bottles at you. In the arcade game, the hag was the one throwing bottles, but in the NES version, she drops skulls down at you that bounce around in random feeling directions. Maybe she did that eventually in the arcade game. I can't remember games I played a lot 40 years ago, but a quick boot up of the ROM in about 15 minutes for comparison just had her throwing the bottles instead. Popeye can punch the skulls and bottles, but you get wrecked if Bluto so much as even brushes you with his little pinky toe. To fight back, you can knock a bucket over his head to freeze him and get a point bonus. Once per life, you can grab a can of spinach that appears on the side of the screen and you go into a rage mode that sends the bully running away from you way faster than I would assume a gentleman of his size could move. But this also freezes the hearts or music notes or letters on the next two stages in place and allows you to gather them up easier. If they manage to reach the bottom of the screen, they will eventually sink into the water and you will die. So priority 1 is don't die, and priority 2 is grab the things to beat the stage. Whooping up on old Bluto is good fun, but it doesn't really get you any closer to your goal. The second stage sees Olive again lording above everyone else while she plays a jaunty harp tune, and a toddler hangs from a balloon 3 stories above the ground. So, not only does she seem to enjoy watching two grown men beat each other senseless in a never-ending battle for her affections, she doesn't seem to give a crap about children either. This time you run around to collect the music note she drops, and now if you want to get back up to the top, you need to time your jump onto a seesaw correctly to fly up and grab the baby just right. That doesn't save the child though, it just helps you out. Man, nobody cares about that poor baby. On the last stage, you duke it out on a pirate ship while Olive tosses down the letters to spell help, which activate a ladder one rung at a time. Now a really annoying buzzard flies towards you and can go up and down the different levels as it pleases. So even if you see it flying towards you on a different floor, you can expect it to shift towards you at the last second. Luckily, you can punch it in its stupid bird face. There's also a moving platform on the top level, but that's about it. Once you complete the third stage, the game loops back around to the first. Bluto's roid rage increases, the angry hag gets angrier, and in general, everything just gets a little bit tougher. I'd say that overall, Popeye on the NES is a pretty good port. Despite not really pushing the hardware in the slightest, there is still a graphical downgrade over the arcade version, but since it was one of the first games on the console, I think that's understandable. The most important thing to me on a port is always whether or not it plays and feels like the arcade game, and I can say that it does. The music is very minimal, there's no real presentation or cutscenes or much of a story, but it doesn't really need any of those things either. It's just a fun game to boot up and play for a bit while trying to outdo your previous best. With all that said, there are better options available like Donkey Kong or Donkey Kong Jr. that I personally feel like are just more fun. You should definitely check it out if you're a big fan of Popeye, and then maybe look for a fandom that isn't 90 years old. And you should check it out if for no other reason than to see one of the very few licensed games Nintendo made before they realized they could come up with more compelling properties on their own. Final score, 6.5. Pros: simple but challenging. Good port that feels accurate. Cons: not much depth. Inconsistent enemy AI.